Hi, I'm Ryan McCallum, and I've been teaching journalism at Buffalo High School for 15 years. But I've never been good at teaching photography, and I wanted to change that. For me, the change started when I met the photographer Nina O'Leary.
I think the thing that I'm most interested in is the in between, where people are putting out this character that they've built for themselves, and like those moments where they let their guard down. Like that's what I'm drawn to, and that's what I'm interested in.
Nina is an incredible photographer, whether she's taking candid moment photographs with families, or portraits of models, or taking senior pictures. She has a way of capturing personality that I've always admired. And Nina is actually a student of mine who credits me with a lot of what she learned with photography. And that's kind of ridiculous because as we got together and talked more about how she learned photography, we kind of thought more about the way I taught and how she didn't learn a lot from me. Instead, her success is largely due to something called the kick theory, which James Paul G says is small initial advantages that a person has ramifying into larger later advantages. When Nina came to me, she already had her own camera, and this is the type of photographs that she was taking back when she was a junior in high school 9 years ago. She was good to start, so she got more attention. Because she got more attention, she got better than her peers. And it kept going, and now she makes her living taking photographs as she pursues a master's degree in fine arts. And that's fantastic, but it's not equitable. So James Paul G says the higher a person perceives their status to be, the more they believe their actions count and they're participating and contributing in a society. So if my students feel like they have a lower status, they don't feel like they can contribute as much. What G says is people need opportunities to be an agent and models of effective action. They need to see that taking action can really matter, and they need to see what successful action looks like. So G, along with Nina, kind of outlined what I need to do with this inquiry project. And that's created a comprehensive photography curriculum for my students that allows every student to improve as a photographer while they explore photography in a deep way, regardless of their access to equipment. And that's a big task. But with the help of Nina, John Holtz, and Kel Lemons, other professionals in the world of photography and journalism, I was able to make steps in that direction. So here's the plan we came up with. First of all, I need to educate myself better on photography. Second, once I learn more, I need to pass that learning on to my students to move the starting line forward so that each person has an opportunity to feel like an agent. Third, I love what Nina said here, is you got to develop a vocabulary and language of affirmation within a classroom, and I need to do that from the very first day of class. And lastly, once I've done all of that, I need to provide my learners with opportunities to develop talent and feel like agents and contributors in my classroom. So how am I going to do that? Well, first step is to get better as a photographer myself. I need to educate myself and refine my technique. Everyone I talked to about photography said that great photography is technique meeting opportunity. And so although I've put myself in places of opportunity, my technique was horrible. Like I said, I've been doing yearbooks for a very long time, but until last week, I had never read a manual for a camera. And that means I'd never shot on manual settings on my camera. I've been doing this for years and years, and I was really nervous about making that switch to manual settings. In fact, this screen was almost entirely foreign to me, although I've been faced with it dozens and dozens of times. I didn't know where to even start until I went into a cave and tried to take photos on automatic settings. And I was so glad I had done some reading on that manual because on automatic settings, this was literally the first photo I got. Nothing. So I made some frantic adjustments and I saw something, but it was blurry. I didn't know what to do about it. So I changed other settings and I tried to stand better. And hey, I got something, but it was still blurry and overexposed. And so I made some setting adjustments and I adjusted the ISO and the f-stop and hey, a little bit better. Hey, I can see something, and now even though I'm in a cave, I'm overexposing my photos. This is really exciting to me, although this photo turned out like garbage. I could get too much light in my camera, although I'm surrounded by total darkness. This was kind of neat. So I kept making adjustments, and now I could see details, and I could decide how to make these photos look better. I got the right amount of light, my shutter speed's good, my f-stop's good, and suddenly I'm getting the types of photos that I wanted to get. It took me a lot of playing around, but I finally had to use my camera's settings in order to get photos that I wanted to. And I came back and talked more with Nina about what I was doing in that cave, and we kind of figured out the ways to help my students understand this better. Now, this is kind of technical, and it comes later in the way that I teach, but it was my first jump into learning the importance of these settings. So first of all, we talked about f-stop, and that was always a foreign concept to me. It was the last thing I learned about. Nina says f-stop answers the question, do I need background for context in this photo or not? And on a Canon camera, this is where the f-stop is. I had never adjusted this in my life. And the f-stop deals with aperture, how open or closed you want your aperture to be. That's really technical, and so a better way to explain it is to look at an example. On the left side, you've got f2.8. It's a very low f-stop. And what that does is puts the sunflower in focus and makes the background kind of blur together. The lower the f-stop, the more the foreground's in focus. This can get too low so that if you're taking photos of a person, their nose may be in perfect focus, but the rest of their face gets blurry. So you really got to find the right f-stop, and you have to ask yourself what background you need. So on the right side, the f-stop is way high, and you get everything. What Nina showed me in her photography was this example, and that is a high f-stop on the left, which allows the background to show through, which isn't great for portraits, and then it shows she went down to a lower f-stop and put her subject in focus. It's how much information she wanted to have clear on that photo that made it good. Next, after you've set your f-stop, you set your shutter speed, which answers the questions, how much light do I let in? So like I said, photography is camera plus time and light. Shutter speed's measured in how much time is the shutter open for. So this is 1/250th of a second. This is what Nina says you should start with. And the lower shutter speed you have, the lower the number is, that means the longer the shutter is open for. The lower that number is, the more you focus on how you brace yourself or your camera. If you're going to go lower than that, you're going to need a tripod or a monopod or have your camera on a flat surface, because the lower the shutter speed, the more blur is going to happen within a photograph. So you don't want to be moving at all. So in the cave, making the shutter stand open a little bit longer, went for more exposed but blurry photos, and I had to find the right setting on that shutter speed in order to let the right amount of light in without being blurry. Now I can go back and learn from these photos later if I think about something called the EXIF or EXIF data. If I right-click a photo and go to properties, I can see on this photo what made it bad. My ISO was really way too high on this one, and I can go back and see that. Now my students can do that too and learn how to make better photography by other people's examples. So with this photo where it was more correct, I can go back and see exactly how I had my camera set in this. So if a student notices their photos in the gym aren't as good as their peers, they can right-click, go to properties, look at that other student's photographs, and see how they can adjust the camera the next time so that they're ready to take better photos. And finally, we talked about ISO, which is the last thing you want to adjust. You want to start at about 200, and if that's too dark, how can you make mild adjustments to this in order to improve your photo? Now, the reason I say you want to adjust this less is because the more you adjust that, the higher that ISO number goes, the greater chance there is of having noise in your photograph. Now, for years I've wondered why some yearbook photos have noise and others don't, and finally I can tell a photographer how to reduce noise in a photograph, which is awesome to me. Because if you look at here, the 3200 has a lot of noise, particles and effects in a photograph, and the 80 has very little. There's always going to be some noise in a digital photo, but by changing the ISO and making better adjustments to your f-stop and shutter speed, you can reduce the amount of noise in a photograph. And finally, because I could do this stuff, I could really put my new fisheye lens to use. I was excited about it because people have gotten amazing photographs with fisheye lenses. And when I went out to South Dakota and took photos of landscapes that I thought would be majestic, they ended up looking like back lots and backyards and just really bad photos. And I tried to get this photo of my family at a lake, and I can see my family, but the photo doesn't look good. And so I tried to figure out, now that I knew how to figure out my technique, how do I get my subjects and opportunities right? So as I was playing with the lens, I got this photo of my wife, and I was like, this is a much better photo. There's something to look at. You get the context, you get that f-stop is wide open, so I've got everything in focus, and I can do more with my camera now. So I decided, let's put more things in the front of this focus on my fisheye lens. And now I've got the lake, the cove, my wife, my son, and something interesting to look at. In this landscape photograph, I get more of the context of the situation in here. By putting my wife front and center, we have someone to look at, and then we follow her eyes to the lake and the landscape, and suddenly that looks like I wanted it to look like. Later on, when I was taking photos of prairie dogs, I managed to get down, put that prairie dog in context, get the sun in the upper third, and I've got a good photograph. Same thing here, I've got my son's eyes in the upper third and his camera in the lower third. It makes a photograph interesting, and I was using my lens better. My technique was finally improving, and now I can become a better resource for my students as they improve their techniques. Now, one thing I noticed in the cave was that I took one cell phone picture, just one, and ended up looking better than a lot of the photos I took on my DSLR. And when I checked the EXIF data, it was set better on automatic settings than my DSLR was. And I was really impressed by that. I took a panoramic photo of the area I was at with my cell phone, which is way easier than doing it with my Canon T5i. And I started realizing that one of my philosophies about photography was holding my whole class back. I was saying no to a tool that most of my students had. And as John Holt says, the best camera is the camera that you have with you. So when I think about cell phone cameras, 100% of my students have access to them. Every one of my students can be taking photos on here, but I was really putting camera phones in a negative light. Turns out camera phones have changed a lot recently. Even Apple is running ads promoting billboards that were shot on iPhones and running TV commercials of videos that were shot on iPhones. You can get quality photos that can run in publications with your camera phone. So what Nina suggested is I start with this. Here's a photo that John Holtz took. He's the one who says the best camera you have is the one that you have with you. I tried that out on my South Dakota trip. I forgot my camera on this nature walk and found this waterfall. And here's a great opportunity I had. Captured it really well. And probably, because I was thinking less, did a better job and enjoyed my hike more because it was the camera I had with me versus lugging a big camera along. So here's what I do. I talked with Nina and Mr. Holtz, and I talked to Kel Lemons, who's with Balfour, and we talked about developing a curriculum that embraces camera phones. Nina says to start out by explaining that photography is manipulating time and light to tell stories with emotion, and focus on these things kind of separately to let students develop into great storytellers through photography, and to be really empathetic, develop that empathetic mind. So here's the basics that we go over before we get into the technical stuff. First of all, with camera phones, you have to zoom with your feet. You can't use your phone's digital zoom ever, because instantly you're degrading the quality of your photographs. You've got this photo of a rabbit, and you can see with optical zoom, which is the zoom that's built into the camera, you get crisp, clear details. But with digital zoom, when you pinch to zoom up into a photo, you're going to lose the details and resolution, and then suddenly it's a photo you can't use. So digital zoom is just not going to happen, and we got to get students to go close to what they want to photograph. Secondly, let's talk about ways to stand to avoid ruining photos with camera shake. As the shutter's pressed, you move your camera. If your camera moves during a photograph, you're going to get this effect that's blurry. So unless you want to go out and buy a tripod for your phone, which does exist but kills the whole mobility factor, you got to learn how to stand. And take a look at the elbows in these photos. Standing right with the camera is all about bracing right with your elbows. So if you've got your elbows braced against your body or against your knee, you're going to take a more steady photo, which means that your subject can move a little bit more because you're moving a lot less. And this is great technique for when they go out and get a DSLR camera and they understand how important it is to grab that tripod or monopod or just crouch down, because it will make for better photos. Another thing you can do if you have an iPhone is use your built-in headphones and take photos with the plus button on the volume control, and it makes for very little shake as you're taking photographs. And if you don't have that, you can set a 3-second or 10-second timer on your phone, which means you don't have to touch it at all to take the photo. If you've got time to set that up and your subject's not moving much, you can get more clear photos. Next, let's talk about light, because light is super important. And in photography, there's 3 types of light that you need to be aware of: backlighting, side lighting, and front lighting. And when you approach a situation, that's the first thing you can think about is, where's the sun, where's the light, where should I stand, and where's my subject? So if you've got heavy backlighting with the sun behind what you're shooting, you're going to get a dark foreground. Sometimes that's great. This is really an artistic type of a photo, not great for a yearbook, so you don't want to do a lot of backlighting. Front lighting can really be great for eyes because they catch that light and reflect it, but you can see here, unless you're going for this effect, you lose some details because you lose shadows. This is a great portrait, but you're going to lose some of the details. If you can get side lighting working right, you're going to get great details, interesting shadows, and make your subject a lot more clear. Here, Nina got great side lighting. You can see the light hitting her face on the side, which creates shadows on the left side, but not too dramatic of shadows. You capture details and you capture personality. If a photographer can control when they take photos, the best times to do it are dawn, dusk, and overcast days. Clouds can diffuse sunlight. So this photo is impeccably lit. This is one of Nina's photos. The overcast sky with clouds covering it diffuse the light of the sun, which would typically give this photo backlighting and make for really even tones on the grass and on the subject. So if you can control your time, this is the best time to do it. Pay attention to those situations with light. Next, get up or get down. Don't stand where you normally stand. Take a photo from 5 to 6 feet in the air, because it just doesn't ever look good. What looks good? Get way high up to a perspective, or in this one, get down low. Vary how you stand to get a perspective that's extraordinary. So don't walk into a classroom, take a photo of a situation and walk right back out. Get near to what you want. Pay attention to how you're standing. Get low. Get that person's eyes. Get the computer. Get the situation. You get the blackboard. You get the photo in the background. All that stuff is important if you can get in the right position. Next, find that extraordinary in the ordinary. You do that by capturing motion and emotion. And to do that, think about eyes. So in this photo of a snake, I could get the whole snake, or I could just get the eyes and have you look for the rest of the snake. The eyes is what make this photo good. This photo of my son with the turtle, it's a nice moment, but there's no eyes in it. What makes the photo better? I'll move to the other side. Get the way that my son's eyes are mirroring the turtle's eyes as he is looking directly at him. I follow my son's eyes to the turtle, see that expression, and it makes for a better photograph. Then you work on capturing motion and emotion and getting those moments where your technique matches the opportunities that you're presented with. And if you've got sons like mine who are great models, it helps a little bit. Or if my students are willing to be photographed as well, you capture those moments of emotion. Lastly, one of the basic things I could teach about is the rule of thirds, which Kel Lemons at Balfour helped me with. And that is placing the subject of your photo in an interesting position within the frame. That could be in one of the axes where the rule of thirds grid meets on your camera. So the top left, top right, bottom left, or bottom right, instead of smack dab in the center, makes your subject look more interesting and gives your photo some more dynamic motion to it. Okay, so if I want to do all this stuff right, then I can focus on my environment. And I can do things like frame a portrait using the environment, or use leading lines to lead people's eyes to where they should be on a photograph, or use the environment to create a frame for the center of the photograph, as happened here at Mount Rushmore with the fisheye lens, using the railing to help frame the statue in the background and give more of the environment. If I've got all of that, then what do? I asked that question to fellow advisors on our yearbook advisor group on Facebook, and that question got a ton of responses. It was an amazing thing to be a part of as we worked together to answer this question and to share resources with each other. That I had turned to a variety of professionals in order to improve curriculum, and everybody had this need to get better. That resulted in people sharing Google Docs folders with each other, sharing curriculum choices. We worked together as a group to organize curriculum, along with kind of spearheaded by Katie Moreno. She shared curriculum and we worked to add to it. Kel Lemons worked with me to create and share resources that she's used to create guidelines and worksheets to help students in different situations. And even Nina helped me create curriculum to present and share with my students as they get ready to move on to the next levels of photography. But hold on, that's not enough. In order to make an equitable curriculum, there's a step that has to happen before that. And Nina and I worked on that in particular when we talked. Nina says that creating photographers is all in the way that they think about themselves. So I have to create an environment that gives kids permission to be unique, to be themselves, in a way that allows them to create stuff. I need to appreciate their different perspectives. I need to say to them, you'll all get completely different things, and we need that. And what I loved about the way that we talked was that in my classroom, I need to create a vocabulary and a language of affirmation for each other. To have my editor group who have been through this situation before, to plant them in that room and to make them full of praise and support so that we can get people's effort rewarded, so that they can start to think of themselves as a person with some agency in a situation, that they have a way to contribute to the class. If I can do that, then I can move on to the curriculum. Nina had a suggestion for me. At the beginning of my class, I show a video by National Geographic photographer DeWitt Jones. And DeWitt gives awesome, inspiring advice.
I got the boat, I got the ghillie, I got the fisherman, I got the right lens, I got the right focus, I got my first right answer. And then my intuition starts screaming at me. It says, turn around, DeWitt. You're shooting the wrong way. Yes, sir, I listened to it.
And Nina could quote that video 8 years later. That was how impactful it was. But when I taught it with Nina, we'd watch that video, we'd be like, cool, this is great, I'm inspired, and then we'd go back to class and focus on writing or something. And so now with my new embracingness of camera phones, then what Nina said is go send them home. Give them a theme. Say tonight the theme is home. Come back tomorrow with a photo. And then we affirm them. We talk about their effort. And if they're going home to take photos, then we're not having a contest at school where the first theme is go out to the school and take a photo, because then if everyone has the same subject, it becomes a competition. Home is open to interpretation. We create that more than one right answer approach. After that, it might be angles, people, light, color, landscapes, relationships, emotion, any other number of themes that would make them into better photographers. She also suggested having a place to share and store and learn, and that's where Flickr comes in. Nina learned through Flickr by having to put her best photos out there, getting feedback and advice from the community. There's lots of professionals on there. So by using the Flickr app, either on the phone or on the desktop, you create a place to store and archive your photos. You create a digital portfolio where you can comment on your own work and the work of others. You can archive, you can organize, you can store, and it's all there automatically. So you can highlight your photos, you can get feedback from other people and communities by joining groups of learners where they rate your photos or comment on your photos. You can find interesting work nearby. And once you find that interesting work, you can see the EXIF data on what type of camera took it and what the settings were, so you can make that into a learning opportunity. And then, armed with that mindset of a learner and a sharer and a contributor as a person with agency who's learning, you can meaningfully address that inquiry focus that we started with. You can create a comprehensive photography curriculum that allows every student to improve as a photographer and explore photography in a deep way, regardless of their access to equipment. Thank you for watching.